She spoke fluent Mandarin as a child, but when she returned to America, that secret gift would shape her entire life in ways no one ever imagined. She returned to the United States in 1927. The family settled in Rhode Island, where her father became a cathedral rector. Suddenly, Audrey was a little girl in a cold New England city, unable to speak the language around her. She had to learn English from scratch, but that didn't erase her first language. Audrey had spoken fluent Mandarin Chinese. It shaped how she saw the world, giving her an awareness few Americans had. That skill, the ability to adapt, became a pattern in her life. Imagine her tiny boots crunching through frostbitten snow on her first walk to school, her tongue fumbling with strange, new sounds, while her mind clung to the melodies of a language half the world away. She would sit at the back of the classroom tracing characters in her notebook margins, each brush stroke reminding her of a courtyard and piquing a nanny who smelled of jasmine, a mother humming lullabies by a window framed in paper screens. The other kids teased her at first, China doll. They'd sneer, but she learned to smile, to listen, to absorb their taunts like rain on stone. By the time she was 10, she spoke better English than any of them. But somewhere in her heart, that other voice, the Mandarin that made her different, never went silent. Her father, a stern man with tired eyes from sermons and late-night confessions, didn't understand this side of her. He wanted Audrey to be proper, to blend in, to shed the pieces of her forest like an old coat. But her mother, ever watchful, knew that in that furnace was her daughter's greatest strength. Never forget, she'd whisper when they lit the stove. On frozen mornings, the world is bigger than this street, bigger than these walls. So Audrey didn't forget. And when the Depression slammed Rhode Island like a hammer, when parishioners came to her father begging for bread and mercy, when even the rector's house grew cold and the cupboards rattled empty, she understood poverty into languages. She saw the world's cracks and knew how to slip through them unnoticed. By her teens, Audrey was a chameleon. She read British novels. By candlelight, her lips moving silently over Jane Eyre and David Copperfield, mimicking accents she'd never heard except on scratchy phonograph records. In secret, she'd recite Mandarin poems. To a rebellion she kept folded inside her like a hidden letter. Teachers marveled at her discipline. A mind like a steel trap, they'd say, not realizing that what they mistook for brilliance was survival. The cathedral echoed with hymns and gossip, but Audrey kept her true voice low. She'd seen what happens when you stand out for the wrong reasons. She'd seen what happens when you don't belong anywhere, but have to belong everywhere. At 16, she lied about her age to work at the local library, shelving books taller than she was, hoarding stories like coins for a future she wasn't even sure she wanted. In the quiet hours between returns and checkouts, she'd run her fingers over the spines of Travaligs and diaries, Chinese dynasties, British explorers, American somewhere between dusty pages and daydreams, she stitched together a vision of a life bigger than Rhode Island. College, of course, seemed impossible. Her father wanted her to stay to marry a young curate from the next town over, a good Christian boy with a reliable job who didn't mind that she knew things he'd never understand. But Audrey looked at that narrow path and felt the walls closing in. So she did what she'd always done, adapted. She applied to secretarial school first, the practical route, the one that made her father nod with reluctant approval. But when the acceptance letter came, she didn't pack her trunk. Instead, she wrote another letter to Radcliffe, then Vassar, then Barnard. "I want to see the world," she scribbled under her breath in Mandarin, each envelope sealed with trembling fingers. "I won't stay here." She got into Barnard on partial scholarship. The day she left, her father refused to come to the train station. He stood in the doorway, the cathedral bells tolling behind him, his face a mask of disappointment. Her mother slipped her a folded note and pressed her hand. "Be kind," it said in both English and Mandarin, "but don't be too kind." Audrey sat in that rattling train car, her breath fogging the window, watching the only home she'd ever known shrink into a blur of brick and snow. In New York, the city swallowed her whole. Skyscrapers taller than any pagoda she'd seen and paying crowds thicker than the cathedral on Easter. She learned to weave through it like smoke. Her classmates, socialites, and heiresses sniffed at her second-hand coat, her immigrant whispers. But then they saw her debate professors under the oak trees in the quad, quoting Confucius and Chaucer. In the same breath they saw her charm foreign dignitaries at less, answering them in perfect Mandarin when no one else could. By 20, she was translating for professors who'd spent decades studying China, but never set foot there. In the evenings, she'd write letters. To her mother, "They think I'm one of them, but I'm not, and I'm better for it." The war came like thunder, cracking the world open. Suddenly, her gift wasn't just quaint, it was vital. The Office of War Information came calling, and Audrey, the quiet rector's daughter, became an interpreter. For generals who needed secrets passed quietly between continents, she sat in smoky Washington offices, decoding messages, listening to frightened men bark questions. She'd answer in calm, clipped Mandarin, each code broken, each rumor confirmed, each slip of a tongue could save thousands, or doom them. She carried that weight without flinching. She was the girl who learned English in the frost and never forgot how to hear what people didn't say. When the war ended, They offered her posts in embassies Beijing, Hong Kong, Tokyo. She chose Beijing first, a homecoming wrapped in shadows. The city she'd left behind as a child had changed, battered by conflict, hungry for stability. She walked through crumbling courtyards that once smelled of jasmine and ink, now rank with gunpowder and fear. She found her old nanny, hair gone silver, eyes still bright with recognition. They wept. Together in the half-light of a broken house. For 5 years, Audrey drifted between world's American suits, Chinese street markets, whispered deals and candlelit tea houses. She carried messages no one could trace, spoke truths to men too afraid to say them aloud. Some nights, she'd sit alone in her embassy quarters, brushing out her hair, whispering poetry to herself in Mandarin so she wouldn't forget who she was, under the layers of roles she'd learned to play. When the politics turned, when trust dissolved, and the Iron Curtain of the Cold War slammed down, Audrey did what she always did. She adapted. She left Beijing under cover of night, documents hidden in her satchel, memories stitched into the seams of her dresses. Back in America, she was hailed as a pioneer, but she knew the price. She married a diplomat who adored her calm fire, but never quite understood that a woman who belonged everywhere could never truly belong to him. Their home was filled with artifacts, scrolls, teacups, prayer beads, but empty of warmth. They smiled for the press, hosted dinner parties, where she translated pleasantries into meaning and lies into palatable half-truths. By her 40s, Audrey was a legend in certain circles, a secret weapon some called her, not realizing that the real secret was her refusal to ever let one world swallow the other. She kept her Mandarin sharp with poetry, her English crisp with politics. She taught her children to listen before they spoke, to learn the words people guard with silence. When her father died, she returned to Rhode Island, the cathedral, bells still heavy with old prayers. She stood in the back pew at his funeral, her mother's note folded in her pocket. Be kind, but don't be too kind. She didn't cry. She thanked the parishioners in perfect English, then lingered by the garden gate, where she'd once practiced her first halting sentences under breath-clouded frost. Even now she could hear her own small voice echoing between worlds. The cold New England air, and the soft Beijing dusk, the hard English consonants and the lyrical Mandarin vowels. In the end, Audrey was never just a girl from Rhode Island or a child of Pang. She was the bridge between them, the living proof that you could belong nowhere and everywhere all at once, that you could hold 2 tongues in your mouth and speak the truth that others didn't dare hear, that you could adapt and survive and shape the story without ever letting it shape you. And somewhere in a drawer decades later, her grandchildren would find an old notebook, the margins lined with Mandarin characters and English phrases looping together like a river that refused to freeze, always flowing, always alive.